Hi, this is Lachlan Giles, and you're listening to Inside Position, which will soon be known as Outside Position.
Hi, Lachlan. Thanks for coming on the show.
No worries. Thanks for having me on. I don't know if we've definitely never trained together, but we've met before in person.
Yeah, we've bumped into each other a good few times, but we've never had proper good chat, I suppose. It's kind of funny, the jiu-jitsu community. You feel like you know people even though you actually don't.
Yeah, that's right.
But I wanted to get started with actually the first time I kind of heard about you was probably at EBI 5. I remember that was probably the time you kind of broke onto the scene for most of the world, and you submitted Hanayaya with a very nice Kimura armbar. And I was just wondering what took you so long to kind of make it onto the top level, because you had been training a long time already. You were a black belt for a few years. And was there anything you changed that helped you get to that kind of world level?
That's a good question. I think I really feel like it was to me, it felt like a very slow progress. I never really felt like I made any. In fact, the biggest jump I can actually think of in my level was probably in the lead up to ADCC 2019. That's when I felt like that year and that last 6 months, when I started kind of adapting my leg locks and doing them a bit differently, I felt like I'd made the biggest improvement I ever have. But I felt like I was slowly getting better results, and I think it's something I could measure to some degree in Australia. There was this guy, a Brazilian guy, Will Diaz. He's quite a really good competitor, actually. He's done quite well internationally himself, although most people probably wouldn't know who he is from an international point of view. But I'd fought him in Australia. I think we fought 7 times, or maybe 9. I think we fought 9 times, and I lost 7 times in a row to Will Diaz. He's a little bit heavier, but so we'd often meet in open weight or in super fight events or whatever. and I lost to him 7 times in a row, but each one got closer to, it was first I got submitted. I think first 2 times to submission, then it was points for a back take, and then it was 2 points a couple of times, and then it became advantages, and then referee decisions. I lost 3 referee decisions in a row, I think, and I was getting mad at the refs. I was give me one of them, and then I finally had a match where the last 2 actually I fought him. It was in the same day, but I managed to get a submission and then just a points victory as well. And I was like, okay, this is good. But it was kind of so that to me was kind of a sign of continuing progress. So.
And did you change anything over the years that helped you get the better results over in Australia in terms of training?
Oh, there's probably kind of 2 major phases. There's a phase where I was kind of a bit of a jiu-jitsu nomad, and I was I had a kind of, I guess, a base gym, but I was also doing quite a lot of cross training, seeking out. I was training with Kit Dale a lot, he was really, was a really good up and coming. I was a higher belt than him, but he was kind of beating me up. I think I was a brown belt, he was a purple belt, I think, but he was really good. So I started training with him a lot, and some other people started their own gym, and I'd kind of try to train around as much as I can, and that was kind of closed one-on-one. I'd just train with Kit for an hour and a half. It would be just us, and we'd specific train, and I thought it was quite smart training. I'd be studying, I think I was trying to learn the Berimbolo at first, and I would do really well, and then the next time I rolled him, he'd just figured it out, and he would just shut it down, and I'd get mad. I'd go home and I'd watch the Mendes brothers, and I'd analyze, trying to see how they deal with the reactions that Kit was giving me, and I'd come back and try to learn that way. And that was really good. So that was kind of a phase that I went through. And then at some point I spent 6 months in Brazil. Liv and I did a big kind of world tour with a plan when we get back from that of opening up a gym. And so obviously the trip to Brazil was quite intense training. We're training at Alliance, so some of the best guys in the world, which is obviously, that was really good training. And then to come back and running a gym, I was lucky to actually take over from the gym that Kit was running, because he was off to the States. And then it was kind of being in charge of creating my own program, and the focus is probably less on me. It's actually a really hard thing to, as you know, to run a gym and focus on your students and yourself as a competitor. It's really, I think it is getting to the point now where to be a top level international competitor, you've got to be quite selfish with your training, and it's got to be, you've got all your time to you, and then you can have extra time for teaching and so on, but you really need to spend a lot of time on yourself, and it goes to like match study and videotape and all that sort of stuff. So.
And how was the scene back then when you started getting into coaching and kind of starting your own gym? Because in the last few years, it seems like it's really exploded.
I mean, it's definitely more popular now, but I started 19 years ago maybe, so like it's a big difference. I think it's less of a difference in the last 3 years than it's been from when I started to, I think when I started, people didn't even know what MMA was, like now everyone knows MMA and grappling, and when I started it was like I knew what MMA was, and I was like, this is this crazy this crazy sport where people are fighting, and jiu-jitsu is like this really good martial art, but no one knew had any idea what I was talking about. So it's changed massively since then.
Developing your own students, has that kind of helped your training? I was wondering, because I feel sometimes when I'm doing a lot of coaching, I'm actually technically much more precise in my own training. Develop your own students into the kind of drilling partners you like, or was there any upsides to it, I suppose?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. I think when you are coaching, you're forced to take a technical approach, whether you like it or not. Really, it's like you have to be, at least, I mean, if you're putting any effort into your coaching, then you have to be trying to answer people's questions, and you're watching them roll and going like, well, you're trying to do a move, but it's not working. Like, what's the key details that you're missing? So I think that's a huge part, and then that makes you reevaluate why things work and how best to teach them, and then of course that adapts your own game. I actually think, to be honest, making my instructionals is probably the best thing I've done, because I actually do a lot of in that I kind of film myself rolling, and because I kind of teach it, and I'll film myself rolling, and I go through that, and I do some narration, and then when I'm doing the narration, I'm usually like, oh, I said that I really do this, but in actual fact, when I watch it, I don't do that at all. I do like this, and then I have to go back and refilm and teach it how I'm actually doing it, or maybe reanalyze when I do that scenario, or when I did so it really like makes it a lot clearer what I do. And then I think then when you're applying it, once you know like, oh, I'm actually looking for this, you can start honing in on that and improving it. So
is it like it makes it more organized in your head or something? Because your instructionals actually are one of the most organized ones that I've seen. They were kind of a bit ahead of the game. Now everyone is organizing them into, let's say, the systems and step by step. But I remember even a few years ago, if someone had a question on particularly underhook calf, because I don't play that game very much, I would just tell them, go home, YouTube, Lachlan Giles. And they still didn't sweep me with it, but it improved a good bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I wonder, I'm trying to think where that came from. I think the fact that that might actually come from academia a bit. I obviously do my PhD, and I think you had to kind of write like that. You had to kind of like structure everything. It's taking an extremely complex topic and presenting it in a way that is digestible, which I think is, and that can be navigated, like I want to know this part. How do I find that? And I think probably going through that process with the PhD and having my supervisors make me rewrite it about 3 times made me think a lot more about how to structure things in a way that people like. So
I'm kind of doing the same in my coaching at the moment. Like obviously a few years ago, I used to be all about detail this, detail that. And now I'm trying to do it in 2 details. But then people are coming up to me and saying, can we have some more? Like, I don't have a clue what to do. And I'm like, well, try and figure it out yourself, or for the first few rounds of drilling, I'll just give them the broad outline and then I'll see the questions. But I wonder, how do you find the balance between giving your students too much and not giving them enough? Because I've always seen more benefit from actually giving them a bit less. I see the coaches who kind of answer everything straight away. The students don't develop it themselves, and then they don't hang on to it or kind of feel it in the same way. So I was wondering how you find the balance for that with your own students.
I think that's the hardest thing about coaching, is like how much information to give. It's just like, I more see it I see it more as a problem of, you've got a room full of mixed experience, and you could teach 50 details for a technique, and the guy who loves that, if it's 50-50 leg locks, and I've got someone in the class that loves 50-50 leg locks, I might have to teach everything I know, just so that person might pick up one
thing.
Yeah, they get one thing, and they're like, oh, that's interesting. Like, Lachlan does it that way. I'm going to try that, like that. But of course, if it's someone new that doesn't play 50-50 leg locks, they're not going to, it's just too much. I'd rather people have a somewhat narrow a game but be good at it, and realize like, oh, actually, like if I get good at something, like if I get good at these techniques and learn all the details well, they actually work, and then expose them to like, get them set up and ready to. So there's some things in that program that kind of make it so like when they want to go and learn an open guard, it's going to be a bit easier, but we're not kind of giving them too much, because I used to do that class a lot broader. I was like, oh, what would a blue belt want to know? And I kind of had all these different things. I'm like, well, a blue belt should know what De La Riva is. So like I put some De La Riva, and then I was like, oh, I'm giving them too much, and they're not good at anything. Obviously some would be, but like if someone's just showing up, it doesn't make them necessarily good at any one thing. And I'd rather them be good at one thing and then build from there.
It's tricky to find the right way to do it when there's a mixed level in the training, because I would usually try and teach to the highest level, but then you don't want the people who are lower to kind of stay lower for too long. But I would be thinking a lot about what's different between teaching beginners and teaching advanced, because one of my friends actually told me something interesting recently, because a lot of the time it's blue, purple belts that are teaching the beginners class because the head coach doesn't want to, But then he was saying in secondary school, it's usually the highest level teacher who teaches the remedial class. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, that's actually pretty interesting. You give them a good start, and then they can teach themselves almost, So that's why I like to make someone good at something first, and then they can almost teach themselves another position.
Everyone I know that got very good kind of took their learning into their own hands, and I think it's, you need someone like hovering over you, like watching almost every role if you wanted someone to actually like tell you exactly what to do and how to improve. And I think in a class setting, the role of the coach is not to like tell everyone exactly what their game plan should be. I think it's kind of like expose them to different. I think it's important that you're showing stuff that works. I try to do minimal amount of time showing kind of weird and fancy stuff. So most of it's just like fundamental positions or movement. It doesn't have to, it can look fancy. If it works, I don't care if it's fancy, but if it doesn't work, or if it rarely works, I try not to show it too much. They're going to work out their own style, but they have to, if they really want to like compete at a high level, I think they have to take their learning into their own hands to a certain degree.
I was wondering as well what you think about competitors who are terrible at teaching, because that's one of the things that confuses me. Like I see people, they're amazing on the mats, they're super athletic, they're actually even quite technical, but they just don't have a clue what they're doing. It's like they're just natural with their technique, and then when they teach it, they actually don't even know how to do it. They teach it like the wrong way that they don't do it. I'm just wondering how some of those people are so good. I feel like a lot of them start when they're kids or something. I don't know if you've had experience with that, but
I think that would be I think people who start as a kid would be much more likely to be like that. But I think, to be honest, even for myself, like there's definitely times where I am taught something and then I add it to my game. But there's a lot of things that I just start doing. I'm playing a position and I start doing it, and then it's only when I'm like kind of what I was saying with my instructionals, like I'll start teaching it to someone, and then I'm like, oh, I'm actually I don't realize what I'm doing until I start teaching it. So I think if you get a coach who's not particularly observant, you've got someone who's teaching something but they're not observant, like they're like, oh, I just do it like this, and they're not actually going like, oh, do I actually? They're not asking the question, is that actually what I do? And then for me, when I'm rolling after I've taught something, I'm like, oh, I taught them like this, but this happened. So I think it's just about being observant and then being willing to change. I usually teach things first how I was taught them. If however the first time I learned an arm bar, I'm pretty sure I just try and repeat that same. If I've never taught it to anyone, I'm going to probably teach the arm bar like, oh, you grab it like this, and then when I start rolling, I'm like, oh, actually, like I tend to add this detail in, and this for me works really well. So
maybe it's just a case of them not having as much experience coaching. But I wanted to get into as well innovation, which is one of my favorite things in jiu-jitsu. I'm always trying to think, how can I not create something new, but put a new spin on something, do a technique in a different way that someone isn't expecting? Because I think that's one of the big advantages that I can have over someone. Obviously, I'm not the most juice head fella in the world, so I need to find other ways around it to try and submit the lads. And you're probably one of the biggest innovators in the last few years. I was wondering what your process is for it, how you figure out new techniques.
For you at your level, it would obviously be really good. And for myself, it's good to like take positions that we're playing with and try to tinker with them and see what angles and so on will work for us. But I think for your average, like for your average purple belt, there's probably just they're gonna get a lot more out of their training just kind of copying what the best guys do, like because there's probably some big holes there that they're missing that the best guys are doing. But I think once you kind of like, okay, I know how Leandro Lowe does his knee cut pass, and I've tried to copy that. What can I play with to help me? And for me, it's mostly troubleshooting based. I won't say I made up anything I don't think anything I did from 50-50 was new, but I think I probably just like favored some certain movements within there that other people were doing a lot less, or I might put pressure in it, like just within that I liked certain controls that other people used, but not to the same degree as I did. And a lot of it was just from troubleshooting. Like I'd be rolling someone and they'd get out a certain way, and usually if it happens once, I kind of ignore it, but when they do it twice, I'm like, I grab them at the end of class and I go, can you do that? Let's start from, usually specific training if I could, like let's start from here and try and get out, and I try to change my leg position or do something to stop them from doing that. And that's kind of how you'd often work out that one angle works really well or one defensive thing works really well to stifle their counter. I probably try to innovate more than I should. As in, like, yeah. I just enjoy the process of going like, oh, I wonder if I grab this here. But
same.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone down a rabbit hole that didn't pay off at all and you regretted maybe wasting a couple of months on some position? Or
99% of the things that I try that I think would work, when I'm just like, oh, what if I try this? And the person's not resisting. And I'm like, yeah, that feels pretty good. And then I try it in rolling, and then I'm like, oh, they can just, they can just posture and it all falls apart. So most of the time it doesn't work. That's why I say, like, I feel like for me, like most of the core game that exists in jiu-jitsu, I've got a pretty good handle on. Like there's definitely things I can improve on there. Like in every position, there's things I can improve on that are fundamental, but it's very hard for me to find what they are. So, but I probably should spend more time doing that than trying to just play around with some different stuff. Yeah.
And how do you recognize then when you're on the right track? Because that's one of the biggest skills I see, is people just knowing what they should put their time into when training. Obviously, you don't want to put 10 years into no-gi baseball bat choke or something like that. How do you realize then when you're on the right track with something? Is it that it's working in sparring, or it just feels like it clicks? Or
that's where it's hard, because I think good if you've got some really high-level training partners to test it on. Because, like for me, I feel like at Absolute, like if I can take whatever I'm working on and bring it to some of our better black belts, and I can actually get it, maybe not 100%, but if I can get it a few times, I'm like, okay, this is legit. But there's been quite a few things that have been like, oh, this is an interesting move, and I'll try it on the purple belts and it'll work, and I'm like, oh, I'm onto something. And then I step it up, and then the black belts they're like, shut it down and turn it against me. I'm like, okay, never mind. You have to try it on the best guys at your gym. What I did with the 50-50 stuff was just look at the Meow brothers and how they're entering into the legs, and go, okay, that's going to work well with the 50-50 heel hooks that I want to do. Even though they weren't doing many heel hooks, I knew that the style and the way they were playing their guard would fit really well with my game. So that wasn't really innovating. It was just stealing a style and making it my own
together in different ways. Yeah. And do you think there's any value in, once you come up with something new, like let's say you're 50-50 running up to ADCC, that people hadn't really seen that type of style entering from the outside, and they're kind of caught out before they really realize the danger? Do you think there's value in keeping that a secret for a bit, kind of the old school Gracie way?
I've never been a fan of keeping secrets, but I think if you've got a secret weapon like that, there probably is some value. Like the thing is, I think I probably could have put all that information out there a year ago, and I think because I wasn't like the favorite for the division, I think most people wouldn't have paid attention to. Like, I don't think anyone would have been any more well prepared for what I brought on that day. But I think if I was to go into fight those same guys again now, I think it would be a lot harder to implement that strategy. Just now that they know I assume they've had some experience dealing with people in training now, fighting that style. So
it does seem to be a little bit trickier with the lighter people because they're more accepting of the seated position or double pull, or just sometimes they just freak out and flip around and try to take your back. I don't know, like it definitely still works at the lighter weights, but I think people are more used to the
leg,
kind of they accept the neutral position a bit more than the big lads just want to accept nothing.
Yeah.
And then they get heel hooked.
Yeah. Bigger feet too, which are easier to catch.
And what were your early influences for the leg locks? I was looking at your like competition record recently, and it's funny, there's a lot of different submissions down along the way, and then it gets to 2018, 2019, and it's like inside heel hook, inside heel hook, inside heel hook, inside heel hook. So I was wondering, what was the kind of secret sauce to changing your game like that just over the last few years?
I think I was quite well primed to start doing the standard, I guess I'll say inside leg positioning and the leg locks from there. I always tried to copy Marcelo Garcia for a while, so I was single leg X, shin to shin, butterfly, get on the inside, get to single X, and then I played a lot with outside Ashi and the saddle for a long time. And it just, for me, slowly, I think I probably blame Craig just for like destroying my faith in like outside Ashi. Every time I'd go there, like there's this point, you go there and he gets out and you end up in a really bad spot and or submitted. I'm like, okay. And then you try and make adjustments and it just keeps getting worse. And then at a certain point I was like, all right, this is a bad idea. Maybe not on everyone. But against Craig, it seemed like it was a really bad idea. So then I just started going, okay, well, leg across body is a bit nicer. It's harder for them to like come down into a really good spot if they escape. And obviously you got saddle and so on. And then so that sort of just slowly morphed into preferring 50-50 for whatever reason. And so what were the influences were, I think at first, like I maybe 10, 15 years, probably 12 years ago, I went in the ADCC trials and I knew that I was just like, well, what does most people suck at is heel hook. So I just saw that as a weakness. So I already knew that was an area to try to exploit. But I didn't have a great system. I think shortly after I watched Ryan Hall's 50-50 DVD and I started playing 50-50. So it's actually where I probably actually started getting some system there. But then it was when I saw, I remember probably a week or two before my first ADCC trial, maybe second ADCC trials, I remember just grabbing someone and saying, let's start in 50-50 and we'll just try and heel hook each other. And we did like a week or two of specific training for that. And that helped a lot. Obviously you'd need more than that nowadays. And then it was seeing like Eddie Cummings, Gary Tonnen, those guys playing like a quite a systematic style. You were seeing them doing these positions, like the positions that weren't really there in IBJJF. You wouldn't go to the saddle in IBJJF. You wouldn't go to outside Ashi. Like when I first saw outside Ashi, I was like, yeah, that's nice, but it's a leg drag. Like that's not going to work. And then, that was my first impression of it. Like I was like, yeah, like Eddie Cummings doing this leg lock position, but it's not going to work on a good grappler. And then I was obviously playing with it. I was like, okay, it's legit. And seeing that he had like a full system from there, and then the saddle probably I didn't think of as such a vulnerable position, but another position that you wouldn't really see in IBJJF. There's no real reason, although people are starting to use it now just for sweeps, but there was no major reason to look for it. And seeing like that play out so well for leg locks, and it was kind of different. People didn't know how to defend it. So, those guys were a huge influence.
And was the specific training, did that help a lot with developing the leg locks and stuff? Because it seems like you do a lot of specific training. I know it's my favorite way to train as well. I feel like I get the most benefit from that, and I can do a lot more rounds of specific training than maybe normal hard rounds. How do you balance the different training methods, like drilling, specifics versus normal rolling?
I feel like the better you get, the more the rolling's helpful. The earlier you are through, the more, like there's like drilling through to specific training and rolling, like as like a spectrum. And I think very early on, the drilling, just getting used to the movements, because you're probably not going to get that right at first. And then you've got the specific training. It's kind of hard to learn a movement without trying it and seeing what it's supposed to feel like and what resistance feels like. So you need to mix the drilling and the specific training together a lot. And then the rolling at first really should just be to kind of let you know what you should be working on. Like you're like, okay, I get stuck here, or I can't do this, or whatever. And then as you get better, starts becoming more specific training, a little less drilling and a little more rolling. And I feel like as a training 19 years, I feel like for me, most of my rolls, if I'm just rolling, I can I'm always working. So I always got like, I guess what you call deliberate practice, but I very rarely roll and just go like, I'm going to tap this guy as many times as I can, or they tap me as many times. Like I very rarely do that. I'm usually like, I'm working on this, but I'm going to try and find my entries to it, try and figure it out and work from there. And then if there's something that's really bothering me, I'll specific train it. But the way we structure our classes for the pros is usually like a 10-minute warm-up, which is just drills. And then we get into specific training, which can be anywhere from like 15 minutes to sometimes up to half an hour, depending what we're working. And then rolls for the last kind of 35, 40 minutes. 50 minutes sometimes.
But that's one of the benefits of being the most experienced people in the room. Some of your roles can actually be almost like active drilling.
I feel like for me, rolling is mostly specific training. Depending, obviously, there's people. There's some people at the gym that I'll roll, and I'm fighting for my life, and then but they're good too, because that's like you can try your A game and you get to see where the holes in your A game are, which is really good training for me too. So
getting on to then longevity, because you've had a long career. You said there you're training, probably close to 20 years now at this stage. How do you keep such good longevity and seem to be getting better and better each year and still putting on great performances where you see other people die off, let's say, earlier in their career?
It's really about cumulative injuries, right? And having a good style, like, no, not a good style, but a safe style. A safe style, yeah. So to me, the most dangerous thing for your body is explosive movements, and just general. Like I see these like 22-year-olds that, black belt world championships, and they're just throwing I very rarely like just throw the legs around, and like everything's like, that's a lot of force on your body. And if you're training like that as well, then I don't think you're gonna have a long career if you're doing it like that, which is fair enough. I mean, if you're like second best third best in the world, and you just need like one more year of going absolutely crazy to be the best, then go for it. Like I think you probably reach your current potential a bit quicker training like that. But I've always had a very long-term view. I'm like, okay, I tend to have a slower style. I'm not particularly explosive, and I think it's probably partially deliberate. In that I think, I don't know if it's like genetic, I'm just like a bit slower, like with my movements, or if it's like as in like a powerful movement. I pretty much never like try and pick someone up and do anything crazy like that. So I think that's important. And then just like I suppose being a physiotherapist, understanding when something's an injury occurring and when it's just soreness, and understanding that. And I try to be pretty smart. Like if I'm really run down these days, like if I've definitely in the past trained where if I was sore, I would kind of like drag myself in for the second training session of the day or whatever. Now if I don't feel good, I just have a day off, and I feel like I learn more and I compete roll better if I'm actually just excited to show up and train, and it's like I'm in a good mood for it because I'm not extremely tired. So there's that. Training load I think is important. Which is just like what I mean by training loads, like don't vary it too much. Don't go from like, if you have 3 weeks off because you're injured or like you've been on a holiday or whatever, don't come back and go crazy, because that's the time you're going to most likely get injured. Your body can quite quickly decondition to a lower training load, and it requires time to build up back to a decent training load. Yeah, but I mean now I'm only really I'm doing one of those pro sessions a day, so 1.5 to 2 hours training, and then I'm teaching at night. I might if I'm feeling good, I'll jump in for a couple of rolls. If not, I'll rest. So I'd probably say I'm training once a day most of the time, but I'm quite happy with that. How about you?
I'm pretty similar. That's kind of what I like, because then my mind is active in it twice a day for, let's say, 4 or 5 hours, and I'm getting 2 hours hard in during the day. And I always show up with a plan. I think that's one of the biggest things. Like, I'm always working on something. Like before training, I have my coffee, and then I make sure I read my notes from yesterday and what I'm trying to work on today, and just little things, just so you have a little idea of something to do. And then I feel like I get a really good quality of training, and I can keep it very consistent, like 6 days a week for the whole year. No months off, no injuries, touch wood. And I think that for me, that's what works.
I've definitely dropped it off a little bit. In the lead up to ADCC, I was trying to learn. I was trying to be I wanted to be a good wrestler, and I've basically stopped wrestling at the moment. But like, I was training 3, maybe 4 sessions, probably often 4 wrestling sessions a week, and I was barely doing any jiu-jitsu for a while, and then so when I was just doing jiu-jitsu, it was pretty much just leg locks and wrestling. That was basically like 70% of my training, and a few rolls in between. But it was but I had to back right off on the jiu-jitsu, because trying to learn a new sport, and wrestling's so hard on the body. So I was definitely like, that wasn't sustainable. That's why I've kind of dropped. I don't feel like at my age I could wrestle, but it's like, how long? I want to be able to do this in 20 years
especially
time,
when you have less experience with it and your body isn't naturally as efficient with it. I'd say it kind of wears it out a little bit more. How do you guide people to have the right influences in the sport when it can be tricky at times with that?
To try to like dissuade someone from that, I think you'd probably have to get into this. I mean, I really think you need to change their psychology to think that it's cheating. I mean, because that's how, for me, that's how
that's the problem.
I view it. I'm like, well, 2 reasons personally why I wouldn't do it. And one is because I think it's cheating. And like, I just think, like, if I did that and I achieved anything, I wouldn't really deserve that. That's how I would feel. I would feel like I didn't actually deserve that accomplishment. And then there's the health side of it, like, to be honest, I'm not like particularly well read on that. I've never like really sat down and read studies on what the side effects are, but I'm not really interested in taking it, so I'm not really that interested in reading into that. But from what I understand, it's not the best thing for your body. And to try to dissuade people, I think the key is, I don't like when people say that everyone's on it. I actually think that's probably the worst thing you can say, because it's kind of implying that that's the only way to do well, which I just know is not the case. And I actually think less people are on it than, I think less of the top guys are on it than, at least in the
maybe in the lighter
weight divisions. I think there's less of them taking it than people actually think. I'm not. I think there's some of the bigger guys a bit more suspect. But and I've fought and lost against like some of the best guys in my division. I mean, I'll say like your JTs and your Lucas Lepres and so on, and never did I walk away from those fights going, oh geez, they're like were too physically imposing on me to deal with, But I mean, like JT pushes a high pace. There's no doubt about that. But I didn't feel like there was anything that couldn't be naturally achieved. Like, to me,
and you feel like you could beat him
with better technique,
natural as well.
Yeah. I just felt like if I had better technique, I would have won. Obviously, physical attributes play a huge role. But I've still never lost a match where I couldn't have just made a technical adjustment at a crucial point where that what resulted then wouldn't have happened. There's always a technical solution, and telling people to just focus on long term. You're not going. I think you're much better off aiming for like 5-10 years in the future where you want to be. Don't try to be unless you're like, okay, you're 30, you've got like a year to be your best. You might want to do like as much hard training as you can. I definitely not saying do anything illegal there, but like I said, like that might be a time to go, okay, I'm going to like risk, injury in my training methods and so on, because this is my last year to give it a good go. So I'll push it a bit harder if that's what your goal is. But if you're young, if you're 20, just like focus on long-term improvements, look after your health, and yeah.
It seems like having the wrong focus. It would be more beneficial to focus on technical mastery instead of getting big and strong and just running your body into the ground. But I find the hardest thing for me is that because it's so prevalent, and there's almost, like, besides the health, there's not too many, you're not going to get punished in the sport for it. There's no testing. So I found it hard that I actually have to have honest conversations with myself of, do I want to do it? And I don't want to. I don't want to even have that conversation. But the fact that it's made me have to think about it and not consider it, but weigh up the pros and cons is also annoying to me, you know?
Yeah, there's an issue. I mean, I feel like I'd like to see the organizations take a tough stance on it. Unfortunately, I generally think it would probably be a bad idea if, like, they pushed for the Olympics for grappling and jiu-jitsu. Like, I don't think it would. I think that'd probably change the sport too much, and it'd end up looking totally different. But the one benefit would probably be, you know, the drug testing, which obviously it wouldn't eliminate, but I think at least having like in most sports, if you get caught, you're like, you know, like you're kind of, no one likes you anymore.
Yeah.
It's like there's a bad,
you're shunned.
Yeah, you're shunned from the community, and it's like, yeah, people get caught in jiu-jitsu and they're just like, you know, they're like, oh yeah, that's, you know, that's what they do. Of
course.
Yeah.
It is what it is, I suppose. But then getting onto physio and injuries and rehab and those kind of things, I was wondering what influenced you to go into studying physio, and maybe some rehab tips as well that you could give to people, or general guidelines for healthy knees maybe.
I got into it, I think I had a very different idea of what physiotherapy was. I think that's why I got into it. I think I had like an arm injury when I was like 15 from jiu-jitsu. I injured my elbow or something and saw a physiotherapist, and I was like, oh, seems like a good job. You work with sports people and treat sports injuries. And then I was like, I managed to do pretty well at school and got into physiotherapy course. And then I realized it's mostly treating old people with, old people with sore backs who are, it's like a very different field to what you thought. And there's other factions of physio which are totally different as well. But like stroke rehabilitation and cardiopulmonary issues. So most of the actual work there's that. But I managed to get into a private practice where you kind of see a wide range of injuries, and worked for a couple of local Australian football teams, and we call it soccer, but I guess you'd call it football team. I was always like into sports. One thing that really interested me was there's kind of a strong focus in physio now on what's called evidence-based practice, which is just making sure that what you're doing is like, there's different ways that people treat, and a lot of it's just kind of just what people think. It's like, oh, I think this treatment will work really well, or that, and people have like strong opinions about things that are actually often, when you actually do the research and study them, you're like, actually, that's no more effective than not doing anything. And people will still have strong opinions about it. So it's kind of a very interesting topic for me was just the evidence-based practice and trying to make sure that what I was doing was actually supported by research, which there's not a lot of that in physio, but there's, it's certainly a growing field, and we've got a pretty good idea of generally that like exercise is beneficial. So that got me interested in actually doing some research, because I thought there wasn't enough out there, and I enjoyed that side of it. So that's when I did my PhD. I find it fascinating, but I don't love clinical work. I don't enjoy as much having someone in front of me that I have to treat. I prefer just like the theory behind it, and I find that really interesting. But in terms of tips for rehab, it's very hard to say, because it's like,
or even general knee health.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, I've seen people. I hate when I see people wearing knee braces all the time. I get like it nearly gives me a headache. I'm just like, oh no, another bad knee. And I see people doing those blast knee slides. I've seen dozens of people injure themselves, just like not kind of taking care of it or not minding it. I don't know.
So first off, in jiu-jitsu, there's probably there's a couple of major things that you could do just to make sure your knees are less likely to get injured. Be aware of positions like 50-50, and anytime your knee gets twisted with your foot turning, like kind of like the rubber guard position, your foot's coming towards your face and your knee's turning away. That can happen from rubber guard, can happen from 50-50. Your lateral ligament, your LCL can tear with that movement. So just be careful. You really don't want to be resisting. It's the same one that people injure with the saddle entry as well. I think I did a video on that if you want to check that out. But yeah, for anyone
I've actually
listening,
hurt my knee with that exact thing in the saddle.
Yeah, I had someone doing nasty. Like, I taught a seminar on leg locks and someone was rolling me and they did that and then it just went like pop. And I was like, oh.
Now, my one wasn't bad, but it was still a warning, like, don't be triangling your legs in that position again, because I was pulling my leg in and then they sprawled on it and I was like, oh, ouch.
Well, I mean, I had surgery myself on both my LCLs when I was like 18 and 21 from wrestling. So like having my knee, low single, knee got twisted outwards, just like, so that's probably sent me for a future of probably arthritis, but I'll deal with that when it comes. But yeah, so there's that. I'd say just like, obviously like tapping to leg locks is pretty obvious. Positions like lockdown, you get people try to like yank their leg out of a lockdown, and that's a good way to tear your ACL. So be careful of that. And this is one that I think is good advice, which is just like deep knee flex, like sitting on your heels under load and like kind of rotating and twisting under load like that it's high stress on your meniscus. So for some people, maybe that's fine, but I think if you do that enough, you just need the one time that it like happens to get caught on your meniscus or tears, and that begins like what is often becomes arthritis when you're older. So it's hard because in jiu-jitsu it's very beneficial to like sit on your heels and play from that position. You're kind of hiding people from getting hooks, and I do it myself because I know it's good for competition, but I'm quite wary to not kind of scour my knees too much in that position. It's so a lot of it's just like awareness like that, just general knee health. I think, I don't know, I think like exercise is good for you. We know that. It's not like just rest makes your knees really good. Like people who rest often get just as bad knees as people who exercise. Jiu-jitsu is probably a little bit too far to the extreme on the other side. Like you're probably doing more wear and tear than is good, but I think like people who do things like cycling, just like gentle movement through range under load like that, I think that's generally quite good. So if you can, for your average knee, it's probably beneficial to add something like that in.
It's almost like a superhero origin story of the guy who's training 20 years, hiding out in Australia, jiu-jitsu black belt. He has a PhD in physio, specializing in knee injuries, and then out of nowhere, medals at ADCC, takes out 3 giants. You couldn't write that stuff. You couldn't write that stuff. But how was the experience at ADCC? Because I was there. You had your wife Livia in the corner. The crowd was really going nuts. Like the scenes were amazing. How were you feeling on the mat? Could you believe it? Did it feel? Just take me through the feelings.
It was surreal. Like you've been around long. Like I've been competing for a long time at black belt, and I'd had some okay performances, but never anything like that. It was definitely like you would think if a light person was going to come through and have a performance like that, it was going to be someone who had like a Marcelo Garcia who's like been dominating their division, and then you're like, oh, I wonder how Marcelo is going to do in the open weight. So it's kind of, I think it's just like the odds of it actually happening was so low. But I think it was just a combination of luck and a strategy that kind of threw people off a bit, like I don't think I'm 100% sure that I'm not the third best open weight no-gi grappler in the world. I can tell you that for sure. But on that day, I came third, so you can't take that away from me.
Yeah, and that's sport as well. Why did you even end up doing the Absolute? Did you know after the loss the day before that you wanted to try again the next day? Or?
I was leaning towards not doing it, but I was at the same time, because actually I think I was saying like I'd just everything was clicking in my training that last like 6 months. I was working that leg lock game, and I felt like I was rarely missing a training. When I go for the legs, it would almost always stick, and I felt like my wrestling was going all right as well. So I felt like I was rolling so well, and to have such a disappointing result. I mean, it was disappointing, but I was like, okay, but it's also Lucas Lepre. Like I wasn't exactly the favorite to go in and win that match anyway. But yeah, I felt like I had more to show. But at the same time, I was like, the open weight, they're all too big, and it's probably just get injured. So I was going to just leave it, and we were just sitting at the bar, and Mo Jassim was there, and he's like, "Oh, you're going to go in the open weight?" And I was like, "Nah, I don't think so." And he's like, "Come on, you're more likely to get an invite for next time." And I was like, okay. But I was also thinking like, yeah, but if I lose, you're not going to give me an invite. But anyway, I was like, oh, okay, if I'm more likely to get an invite, like, because I think I found out like after I won the Asia trials, which was like that was like just stressful enough alone, because you got one chance to get there. We only had the one trials for Asia. They cancelled the Kazakhstani one. And I found out after that, they were like, oh, we were going to invite you. And I was like, oh, okay. But that was like the last invite too. I think I was like, okay, like if I don't win these trials, I'm not even going to get to ADCC. So I was like, okay, if I can improve my chance of getting an invite for the next one, I should enter. So, but I think I said, but just don't give me someone big like Buchecha. Which I was glad I didn't get, but I got kind of.
And how were your expectations going into that then? Like starting the Absolute, first match against Kynan, what's going through your mind, and what are you expecting? Are you expecting that you're going to heel hook him?
No, I probably thought I was going to lose, but at the same time, in some ways, it was maybe it just, maybe I was too. We can. Ifs, all these ifs, but maybe I was too hesitant in my own division, like trying to find the right time or whatever. And I knew that I had pretty much one way to beat him, and one way only. And I knew that was going to be by pulling guard, being very aggressive with my open guard, to not give him any, like, not let him get past the line of my knees, and like keep playing that outside position and just like get to the legs, get to 50-50. And that was the only way I could. That's the only way I could see myself winning that match, and it had to happen. So it was pretty crazy.
Doing the same thing to Patrick Gaudio, your confidence must have been kind of going up and up. Did you think then Gordon's going to get it as well in the next round, or what were your thoughts after that?
I never thought, to be honest, I don't think in any of those matches I thought I was going to win. Like as in, if you would have said like, are you going to win? I wouldn't have been like, yeah, for sure. I just say I've got a chance, go for the legs. And it's the same with Gordon, I knew that I'd been fighting Gaudio. Like I saw that he was pretty tired he had like a very hard match beforehand. So that gave me a bit of confidence. I was like, if I push the pace, he's going to get tired. Like, obviously wanted to try and get it quick, but yeah, I thought that was promising that he was tired. Gordon, I obviously heard all the stories of how good he was in training from Craig. So I wasn't exactly going in like, oh, I'm going to, beat him. But at the same time, like, I thought the stuff I'd been working on was a bit different to at least what I would expect him to have been too exposed to. So
it was a great exchange in that match.
Yeah. So I didn't get him, so it wasn't as good, but I thought a lot of the stuff I'd been working, like, kind of happened, and I was like, geez, okay. So like it made me quite confident in the leg exchange, but at the same time I knew that was my only, like, I did like a little thing which I'd been working, which is kind of like dangling your foot, where they try to take an outside heel hook, and it's like, I'm like, well, I'm not going to beat him any other way than a leg lock, so I have to take some risks and do things like this. And
getting the podium by beating Muhammad Ali then in the bronze match, the crowd really went nuts.
Yeah, it was
How
insane.
was the feeling? Was it satisfaction, excitement, disbelief? Yeah. What was going through your mind with it?
Probably a bit of all of those. Yeah. To be honest, it was just like, it was amazing, like kind of a lot of things coming together, but just knowing how much I'd trained over the last, not just in the lead up for that ADCC, but just like, pretty much for the last 10 years had been like a somewhat of a full-time venture with, and I'd probably come to accept that I was probably never going to be at least I was like, in my mind, I was like, I'm probably not going to be a world champion. Like, that's, in all likelihood, that's not going to be the case. But to have a result like that, like just something to like solidify that. At the same time, I was quite, would have been quite happy with my career regardless of that. But just, that's just nice. It was just like a really nice thing to.
That's really something that no one can take away from you, you know? That's
yeah. And I was kind of aware of how much of a freak occurrence that was as well. Like that just shouldn't happen, but it had happened, and there I was, like running around with my arms in the air, not knowing what was going on.
And in the preparation for that competition for ADCC 2019, was there much work you did on like mental preparation, or do you have different routines that you go through before the competition, or would you be just more freestyle it?
Nah, I don't have a good mental preparation strategy. I've been asked that a few times, and I every time someone does, I'm like, I probably should actually, like, because I do feel I've had plenty of fights before where I felt like I was kind of slow and reactionary, and then I've been like, oh, there's 2 minutes left, I'm down, I've got to win, and then I'd start like doing my game I'd start winning, and I'm catching up, and I'm like sweep, and I'm like, but it's too late to like actually consolidate and get back to good position to win, and that had even happened before against some pretty good opponents where I'd like been down, and then like later in the match, like fight really hard and be like, oh, actually, if I had just done this at the start, this could have been a lot better. So there probably is some things I could do too. I've
had similar experiences like that as well. And someone actually explained it to me that it's not like that, it's mental consistency is one of the things you want. And that kind of hit home for me, that sometimes my mental state or the things I would be thinking about or my concentration levels will be up and down based on what competition. So it would be nice actually to kind of have set routines that you can kind of keep some mental consistency. So I've been working a bit on that, and hopefully for next ADCC I'll be a bit better, because the last one was mentally all over the place. So I kind of learned the lesson the hard way.
It's definitely, I'd like to, I think if you think about like the open weight, maybe just by giving myself kind of that, like, okay, I've got no choice but to, like, if I'm not aggressive at like just doing this, I knew exactly what it was, and I had like, you can't let a kind and like start to settle in on your legs and start to like pressure you, like that's just going to be disastrous. So you have to just like, go. And I think ideally I could bring that to any match I do.
And so what would be some of your future goals then in regards coaching, competing, and just your future in the sport?
For my personal goals would, I'll be back in ADCC 2022, I guess it is.
You'll definitely be getting the invite this time.
Yeah, I know, thankfully. And yeah, I want to do well in my weight division. I still don't know. If people ask me if I'll do the open, I don't know. I still think it's dangerous. Yeah, like, I wonder how many injuries I've caused in people like going like, oh yeah, little guys do the open weight and they do really well and they've gone in. I want to do well in my weight division. So let's see. We've had it's been good actually. I've had Levi's been down in Melbourne, so I've had someone like my weight who's like top level. He's just getting into no-gi, but top level grappler, and it's just awesome. Having someone my weight to work with like that and kind of try everything out on. So that's been really good. So that's for myself. That's really the goal. I mean, I'll probably try and jump in a couple of matches in the lead up to that to get some my comp mentality back. But I'm not that interested in just competing for the sake of it at the moment. I've got the eyes on that ADCC, and it's kind of skill development up until a few lead up comps and then that. For the team, we've got the Asia Oceania trials they're supposed to be in Singapore at the end of this year. I'm not sure if Australia will even be open to go, but if not, there's supposed to be trials in Melbourne as well early next year. So yeah, it'd be awesome if we could take all 5 divisions, but as a team. But I mean, maybe there's like, we've got someone in each division, but a lot has to go right for that to happen. But we've got in each division, I think we've got someone who's got a good shot at it. So yeah, and then obviously it would be awesome as a coach to take some of those guys into ADCC and even further than that if we could. So,
well, thanks a million for coming on the show, Lachlan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Big thanks to Lachlan for coming on the show. It was really interesting to hear him relive the performance of a lifetime that he put on at ADCC, and I'm looking forward to seeing him back there at the next event. As usual, if you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and also share it with your friends. That really helps the podcast grow, so I appreciate it a lot. We'll be back next week with another great guest. Until then, slán agus beannacht.